All right, guys, we're going to watch ISC. This is very similar to the episode from last week where it's a Meet the Devs, but it's level design, and I can already see Pyro in the thumbnail. So I assume it's going to be very similar to last week in the sense of we're going to get to meet the developers, we're going to find out about them, but we're also going to see some of the cool work that they've been working on that we haven't seen, which was so great about last week's episode. At the very least, I hope it's that way, because last week's episode might have been one of the best episodes I've seen all year from that standpoint. And at first I was like, I can't believe they've done this with these like Meet the Devs things, because we've had them on SCL forever. But with that said, let's jump right into it because I'm excited. I loved last week so much. I can't wait to watch this week. It's 14 minutes.
Inside Star Citizen is many different things to many different people. But at the center of it all is our desire to educate about the very nature of game development itself. And this week's
which I absolutely hate about it. But
part 2 of our 3-part experimentation and format, we lean into that aspect and explore some of the foundational philosophies that guide just one of the teams that are continuously working to iterate and improve on the persistent universe as it prepares to grow in this year's upcoming Alpha 4.0. Now, where last week we met the team, this week it's how we work level design with the folks from the Frankfurt level design team.
How's that? Better? Might even be too loud now. How we work. I feel like we're gonna run into the too much game dev, not enough Star Citizen. Let's see. If I see Stanton
level design. It's probably one of the hardest things to describe in game development.
We take gameplay elements and we take the environment and we just bring all that together.
It is more than the sum of all of its pieces. You can't just kind of speed level design a forest log cabin. That's not enough. Like, what is the player doing there? What does it mean? Why does this thing exist in this space? What can the player do as well?
Okay, first Easter egg. Did you see it? I'm kind of in front of it. But he's got a jacket. Maybe that's rewards for running cargo.
What can the player do as well?
You've got the environment art that makes the art itself. This is not us. We have the gameplay teams that make all the gameplay elements, and this is not us. What we do is we take these two things, we combine them together and make it cohesive environment for you guys.
I don't know if that was New Caves or not. This is prison.
We design the space itself, and we also accommodate everything that goes inside of it.
A lot of the things that you use, like hangars.
Guys, it looks just like that too. It's really good.
ATC, I hate to say it.
And this is exactly what it looks like. So this gives me the opportunity to kind of share with you a little bit more about Evocati. This is exactly my experience as soon as I walked into Evocati, except I grabbed an elevator for me, and then I went into the elevator and I saw somebody else's button, and I was able to press it and go to their hangar. All of that stuff apparently is fixed in tonight's build on Thursday, where you still are able to go to their hangar, but the trespassing was not. I was there for 2 minutes. I could have done some serious damage, but now it's like 10 seconds or something, I think Luke said. So there's a lot of things fixed, but this is exactly what you're going to see. You no longer really get the super long list. If you're at Orison, you will get a list because there's a lot of docking collars. No docking collars at the cities, only docking collars at Orison because it's floating. So yeah, you're just going to see your big old button that's just for you, or you're going to get the smaller ones when you're in a party with the members of your party. It's really, really cool.
Transit systems.
Elevator rides.
Wait, you're responsible for the elevators?
Elevators are our problem, yeah.
We have a face to the problem. We have a new emote. Gray elevator.
No, we're just a setup site.
If you die in the elevator, that's actually a problem from the coding side. We just throwing them under the bus.
Is it possible in a sandbox game to have level design?
Yes,
Obviously.
because you have to consider all of the individual constituent pieces and why they need to exist together. You can throw anything in there, but you have to account for, like, does this begin to break the game? So you have conversations with economy, you have conversations with code, you have conversations with system design, mission design, and you have to figure out how all these pieces, again, stitch together.
I do think the
So there
game
are
is not a sandbox, though. I think it's very much going to be a Sam Park game, but they keep saying sandbox because that's what they want to sell a little bit, more than like sell as in not like physically sell for money, but as in what they want to say the game is, because I think it's a little bit more sexy.
Principle for good level design.
First is readability. This basically means clarity in your environment.
You're going to make sure within your layouts that everybody can understand where they need to go, what they need to do.
All the affordances need to make sense. The typical one could be, I've got a door in front of me. How do you describe a locked door from an unlocked door?
For example, you're fighting an AI and they can read easily the elements, the gameplay elements. You need to understand your cover space. You need to find the AI within the space. If the AI is in a black area, you will not see it at all. And this is very important for us. We really focus
Until you have your night vision scopes that are in Evo right now. Let's go.
on this kind of stuff, and we make sure that anything you interact
There's a nice hiding spot in a Star Marine map that nobody can see me. It's completely black, but then the moment they put their night vision scope, they were able to see it. It was pretty sick.
within the environment, you can see it as clear as possible.
The next is flow and leading lines.
And it was in heavy armor.
Creating a good composition of all these things, from layout, lighting, some props, a good mix of combat spaces or like combat encounters, and then time for exploration, and then doing a mix between both.
We make sure that you're not going always on a straight line. We make sure that you're not spending 2 hours walking from one space to the other.
In Pyro, you will come across a lot more players as we funnel them into a certain space with a concentration of missions, for example, or things to do.
Okay. They said funnel.
You know, that is flow to us. On the flow level, that is higher on the chart. And then certain areas will be a bit more on the lower end of your pacing. Leading lines is a compositional technique.
Some examples can be you are following the cables from one interactable through to another area to interact with another element. You're being breadcrumbed along, you're being led along these leading lines.
With Pyro Station, you have the core element, you have the arms pointing towards the center. It's a very simple example, but more on a larger scale. But we look at it also on a room basis.
We're trying to direct you through to a discoverable place over here, or we're trying to direct you through to like a vent. We're using light and cables to navigate you through these spaces.
Third is options. We want to give you guys multiple options.
This is way more on the game dev side than last week in terms of things shown. So this episode so far, we're about a third of the way through. Not as good.
So you can complete
That's
your
okay.
objective the way you want it.
In context of our game is giving the player the opportunity to approach certain situations in different ways or get an idea of the situation in the first place.
Not as good for
You
me.
have straightforward options, the combat route. You have a more sneaky option for players that don't like to engage in combat so much. Or you can also have like a puzzle route for players that like to do more interesting environment interactions.
Showing prison is never a good thing at the moment.
Then there is clustering. Clustering is also falls into the compositional techniques or more in the layout side of things.
Clustering means that you start like bringing objects together to create something a bit more natural.
You put importance on things by grouping certain things up into clusters. A specific power example would be the outposts, where you have a big landing pad in the center, and then you have groups of clusters of buildings that are arranged around it, and they form like points of interest by themselves.
We've not always been successful with clustering, but moving forwards into the future, especially with Pyro, we're taking a renewed effort to concentrate and cluster things properly.
Finally,
Okay.
there's scale and proportion.
Do we have any issues with any of that stuff in Stanton, really? I don't know.
Scale is important in how you
I know the outposts in Pyro are just bigger and have more stuff. Maybe that's what they mean.
vary it. If everything is large, for example, nothing is large anymore.
You think right now things are just too small? I think just Stanton is old. Like the old, like just old tiny outposts. It's just not upgraded yet, you know. So maybe that's what he means. But yeah, we'll see.
We're the one that
Yeah, like the new RMC outposts in Stanton. I mean, they look just like Pyro ones, right? So maybe that's why we like them. But yeah, it's just old assets, and still the game design isn't there. They could do the level design, and they've. I mean, if these guys aren't the artists that do it, but they're a big part of a lot of that stuff, and the or not these guys. Like some of these guys are the artists, and some of them aren't. But it's the gameplay that is going to make these areas a lot better. I think the Pickersfield or something like that, right? Why is Pickersfield so much cooler? Is it just because it looks good? Is it just because it has good level design? Or was there also just cool opportunities there? You can get the legendary armor there. You can get the RMC there. And like the best trade run was there. And if you're a pirate, the best piracy was there because the best trade run was there. So
defines all the metrics for FPS, but also for ships. We're talking about ships that have a few meters to some ships that have hundreds of meters. And we need to make sure that the transition from A to B feels always smooth and natural, right?
If you, for example, come from a maintenance corridor or a small little packed little vent and expose yourself to this big room, you'll get a more likely an aha moment.
So we still have a very big open spaces, but condense the gameplay space a bit more.
Did I miss an Idris paint? Where was the Idris? Oh yeah, maybe.
It's natural, right?
If you, for example,
and
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Have a very big open spaces, but condense the gameplay space a bit more. So the players don't have so much options to walk around, but still get like the sense and the immersion of like a big open space.
proportion is just also feeds into scale.
So you can use proportions to be able to scale up, like what is kind of the background space, what is the foreground space, and what is the midground space of like what is immediately interesting to you as a player, and what is in the background that's not yet relevant to you. So you can land at one outpost on Pyro 2, and you can see yourself in a sort of like habitation.
I struggle so much with videos like this. Why am I here at these locations? I struggle with this so much. I just don't have the love for these beautiful locations that they like. I mean, the shots that they have just shown in the last 3 shots are so good. But why am I here? Why are these beautiful? What am I doing here? I just
Outpost
don't
village.
have that.
Down the hill you can see there's a refinery area, but the main feature of this place that you were drawn to initially was this massive mining tower.
I mean, they have to design them to put stuff in them first. No, they don't. And no video game company ever has in the past. So this I follow Star Citizen, all of a sudden I'm a game developer type comment is wild to me. Is the idea of you have to make the locations first. You don't.
These become like your immediate foreground, your midground, and your background. But again, you can always come into your ship and go to this massive mining tower. Therefore, this becomes the new foreground. You're always orbiting it, you're transferring around. This becomes your landmark to orientate yourself around all these other spaces nearby.
Traditionally, in level design, you start out with a pre-production phase.
Rockstar does? Oh, that's funny, because if you look at the Rockstar leaks, everything looks like shit, and they're figuring out the gameplay. Everything looks like shit. They're figuring out the gameplay. Listen, Eve Vanguard is not the best game in the world or anything like that at all, but you're running around and fighting enemies that don't even have textures on them. They're just literal boxes that you're interacting with. Everything is in white or gray box state because they're figuring out the gameplay first. That's my argument here. Is why am I going there first is the most important thing. Make it beautiful next. That's it. because you can't figure out what you're designing the level for if the gameplay doesn't exist.
This is where we ideate, conceptualize, we gather references, we do sketches, we do top-down layouts of our brain map, put things together.
We then go into white box, which is literally going into the editor, start mocking things up in 3D, creating the space, and defining where the gameplay elements are. We have a
Only
shop on the
CIG
right,
does
shop
this
on the
shit.
left, your elevator transit over here. We work at different scales at this point, and we define basically everything in the location, but with very, very basic shapes.
And then we
Guys, I would have been so cool. I think my dick would have gotten hard if Pyro, the locations looked like that. And it was all about gameplay.
hand it over to art, so the focus lies more on art for grayboxing, making things more pretty, with us still having an eye on it to see that the original concept is still intact.
And then finally we'll move into final art, and the level designers will be able to kind of keep all of these locations, like the intent of the location is kept consistent. It doesn't veer off too much into suddenly it's too big or too small. This is the original design direction that we wanted from beginning through to end.
Once a location is released, it's not finished for us because there's always maintenance and additions that we do. When there's a new functionality, a new gameplay coming in, we go in and we add them to all the locations, we retrofit the locations. So whenever there is a bug in the PU, we have to maintain these locations. So we would go into new Babbage and fix AI placements or shops not working anymore. But mostly level design is also about coordinating with every team.
So
I think the best example of where they've done it really well is probably the distro centers. You have all the sneaky ways of getting in and out of locations, as well as missions that are unique to those areas that take care of that stuff. I think they did a lot more of the let's figure it out together and then make it look pretty stuff with the distro centers. My complaints are more about everything that's come before the distro centers.
With every team.
So be it with
What
like light.
sneak did we see? You guys-
Fix, retrofit the locations. So whenever there is a bug in the PU, we have to maintain these locations. So we would go into
No, this is in the game
new
now.
Babbage and fix AI placements or shops not working anymore. But mostly
Exactly.
level design is also about coordinating with every team.
So be it with like lighting, mission team, environment art, audio, narrative, they work more or less in their pockets, and then we try to keep an eye on like the big picture to bring everything together and look that everything is coherent and cohesive.
What is important to us, or what we really want you to experience is
Low
a nicer
frame
flow
rates.
in the stations. I think what we realized with Stanton is, you just take a ton of elevators from place to place. We kind of want to optimize that for you.
Bro, Pyro, the stations are really big. I feel like we run a lot at Pyro, too. I don't feel optimized in Pyro. What did you guys think? We definitely take less elevators.
Make it a
No
bit
trams.
more efficient so you don't spend a lot of time going from A to B.
We are trying to bring, for example, the clinic and the habitation right away into the shopping area and trying to make it much more compact.
Pyro felt better
At the
for
same
you?
time, we really, really want to offer some good gameplay content within the stations, outside of missions that you can go into and discover on your own as you explore.
It's not that I didn't like the Pyro stations, just to be clear, but if I do remember running around a little bit, getting lost. They're very large, and I think from your hab to the spaceport section it's a bit of a distance.
We try to improve Pyro stations with all the lessons
like
we've got
almost nothing.
from Stanton.
And now for outposts, each location has to have its own identity. Like, does this outpost fulfill the need for a combat space? Does this outpost fulfill the need for like a social space? Does this outpost fulfill the need for like a puzzle space? All these factors come into play and come into consideration when creating a whole new location.
That was
We
interesting.
want you to be able to discover little points of interest around the outpost. It's kind of feathered. If you come across an outpost, there will be multiple sub-locations around it. These could be like villages around it. This could be derelict settlements that are abandoned and you have to go into and can find potentially loot in.
And once you've landed your ship, you are no more than a short walk away from the main resource.
There you go, guys. Did you want to know what we called it? We called it, actually. This is the Pyro version. So if you were to get a freight elevator at the Stanton Salvage yards. These are what they look like. This does look bigger, though. This is what it looks like at a Stanton junkyard.
We've arrived at this outpost, which is to trade. We want to encourage use of ground vehicles to be able to pick up your cargo that you bought from this place, load up your little Drake mule, and drive it over to your ship.
So it's not covered. It looks different. So they just took the pyro version and they added it to the salvage yards. That's basically what they look like.
Load that ship and then fly out with your goods.
We wanted to create a location that felt real. So you had the logistic is there.
Yeah.
The AI created roads between the different points of interest within the outpost so that it feels logical for a player to walk in or to traverse.
Pyro is always dangerous, so any social space can turn into a combat scenario. So you need to be able to duck into cover at a moment's notice, even when you're doing nice, easy trade and socials. So we have to provide you with opportunities for cover and exciting FPS combat scenarios.
There's a lot of things to consider for an open world game that on this scale. You have to account for multiple, situations and have players also be able to deal with all kinds of circumstances. So it is a complex undertaking. It's a challenging one, but this is what we want to account for in Pyro.
I don't remember that area. I don't think I've ever saw that one.
As much as we can.
That was huge.
Level design matters or is important because we think of a very broad scale and try to craft and create a great experience for you as the player.
Level design ends up being greater than the sum of all of its parts. I get to talk with all these different disciplines at CIG, but also get to kind of hold the hand of the player and curate that all the way through.
We focus on the player experience. We look at all the features that exist and we try
I climbed that ladder and went all the way up there. Yeah, I remember that
to
spot.
bring them up all together into
And these are pyro caves as well, by the way.
a cohesive environment
I did a mission in one of
that
these.
feels really fun for the players.
Do you always succeed?
No, but it's not always like within our hands, but we always try our best to, within the framework we have, to create like the best possible experience for you guys.
So we've learned a lot from our time in Stanton, and we love hearing all the feedback we get from you as players. We want to take that all on board and begin establishing ourselves forwards when we come into Pyro.
What we really want to do also is
Pyro
balance
locations are like
out
10 times
gameplay
better.
with the visuals. I mean, in the past, we've seen a lot of focus being spent on the visuals and less so on the content. This needs to switch around and find an even plane. And level design is just one way we're doing this in Pyro.
Holy shit, somebody
Because
said
level
it.
designers really want to make Pyro.
Somebody that gets paid by CIG said it. So now maybe the community will parrot that because a dev said it. Whoa. Get out of town.
And Stanton in the future, a great experience for the players from a flow perspective, boring you less, making things more efficient for you.
Rewind it and play it again. I know. I might cry more now than I did in the server meshing demo. Let's listen to it again.
Balance out gameplay with the visuals. What we really want to do also is balance out gameplay with the visuals. I mean, in the past, we've seen a lot of focus being spent on the visuals and less so on the content. This needs to switch around and find an even plane. And level design is just one way we're doing this in Pyro.
Wow.
Because level designers really want to make Pyro and Stanton in the future a great experience for the players from a flow perspective, boring you less, making things more efficient for you as you...
Maybe Summit clips reach their ears. Thank you, Summit. Thank you, Summit. They might actually make gameplay before visuals in Star Citizen. It definitely wasn't anybody here in the community currently. It was 100% Summit. Thank you so much.
The gameplay loops that you want to follow and offer you gameplay content that you can just discover on your own.
It was Shroud, guys. It was Shroud.
So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that level design is a discipline that brings many other aspects of game development together to form what we always hope is a cohesive and enjoyable experience for the player. That the philosophies and precepts that guide their decisions continue to evolve as they learn important lessons from the development of Stanton and, of course, apply it to Pyro. And that Pyro itself
Oh, the cave had a map in that. Interesting.
continues to inspire an experience that should be markedly different from the one we have today in Stanton. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thanks for letting us share the people and process of game development with you, and we'll see you all here next week.
Okay. Not a bad episode. I wouldn't call this a bad one, that's for sure. No sneak peek at the end, or no goofiness at the end. I wouldn't call it a bad episode, that's for sure. It was good, but it was not last week. Last week they hit us with the good stuff. So then tomorrow, Star Citizen Live is them doing cargo. I'm gonna say this right now. If this goes up on the React channel, I don't know when that I'm gonna react to that Star Citizen Live. Reason being is if we're able to play the cargo update on the PTU, I am going to play it so much because my goal is to see what reputation is in 324 and what endgame reputation for cargo looks like. So I am going to push because every patch brings a wipe in PTUs typically. So that's what's going to happen there. So we'll see. I would rather play the missions if they're there than watch somebody make them, right? So we'll have to see. So that kind of is relevant a bit as well to this episode because I would rather see a lot of the gameplay elements than the art elements or hear people talk about game development or stuff like that, right? But overall, good episode. Again, not as much of a banger as last week, but still pretty cool. This one was more interesting to listen to their process, though. Because it is so meaningful for the player. Like, hey, we want to put a lot of cover in and things like that. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you on SCL tomorrow, I guess. Or in a few days.